So I spent 50 grand on like a study, basically trying to get in front of as many like rich folks as humanly possible. And then doing a bunch of qualitative conversations with like, number of billionaires, a bunch of like centimillionaires, et cetera, and just trying to figure out like, okay, what makes them happy? What makes them unhappy so that I can, kind of take some of those lessons for me personally.
This is Patrick Campbell. He bootstrapped a business and sold it last year for $200 million. And now that he's rich and has a bunch of free time on his hands, he decided to spend the average American salary to interview the richest people on earth. His goal was to find out what they spend money on to make them happy. And even though you may not have as much money as the people he interviewed, the things that made these billionaires happy are very basic and something you could easily replicate for a fraction of the cost. The truth is, if you're unmotivated to make more money or save more money, it's not because you're lazy. It's because you haven't discovered how to spend your money to maximize your happiness. So in this video, I'm going to explain the 5 different levels of happiness Patrick uncovered in his study. I'm going to then change his examples to show you how you don't have to be rich to copy what he found. And then I'm going to give you a new framework for spending your money to unlock unlimited motivation in your life. So in order to build this framework, let's start at the beginning. Level 1 and 2 of happiness are fairly obvious, but there's a subtle difference between the two levels that I never realized until Patrick talked about it.
One of the biggest lessons that I think is most helpful, and I don't know if everyone's going to be able to like hear it, they'll hear it, but I don't know if they'll actually like internalize it, is when you look at the stack of like how money can actually bring happiness, there are some really, really obvious things like people who spend money on stuff, they are happier than people who don't spend money on stuff. So buying a Birkin bag that you guys talked about, I think last episode, like that brings some joy. It actually does. It's not something that's like completely joyless.
So the first level of happiness is buying stuff. Now, something we have to remember as I go through this study is that he talked to people worth billions of dollars. So his examples are unrealistic for us peasants, but I'm going to make them relatable. Just stick with me. For example, when he talks about buying stuff, he gave the example of a Birkin bag. Well, Birkin bags typically cost north of $100,000. I don't know about you, but I absolutely can't afford that shit. But an example of nicer stuff would be maybe a $60,000 truck instead of a $20,000 car. A $1,500 Gucci purse versus a $150 Michael Kors purse. When you make more money and can upgrade some of these items in your life, they will bring you some level of happiness. Level 2 builds off level 1 with an increase in happiness coming from a subtle difference.
But they're not as happy as the people who spend money on like a particular hobby or a particular like narrowing of stuff. If you're really into F1 and you buy your own car that you go race in the track, that brings you more happiness, right?
So if you thought a Birkin bag was a lot, well, an F1 car costs somewhere between $12 and $15 million. So in comparison, it makes the Birkin bag look like a premium trash bag. But understanding what you really have a passion for and spending money on that passion will bring you more happiness than if you just bought stuff you don't necessarily have a passion for. For example, if you had a passion for collecting watches and you bought your first Rolex, you're going to be a lot happier than if you just bought nicer shoes, because you place more value on the watch than the shoes. The third level of happiness surprised me because I thought that this level would actually be the thing that brought the most happiness. I clearly was wrong.
And then one layer above that, in terms of increasing even more happiness, is experiences. So this is something that we've all heard about. Like buying experience actually does bring more happiness.
Experiences bring so much happiness that there are multi-million-dollar companies who specialize in giving billionaires access to experiences that you've never heard of, like spending the day with Taylor Swift or Michael Jordan, getting into the sold-out after party at the Oscars, and much more. But for the average person like me, it could mean spending money on an all-inclusive resort in Mexico, LA Lakers tickets to watch LeBron James before he retires, or spending the day racing a Ferrari around a track. So up until this point, you probably haven't been very surprised about the first 3 levels, and that's because it's what we see the majority of society spend their money on first. And I'll tell you why that's backwards in a minute. But before I do, we have to talk about the top 2 levels of happiness. Level 4 and level 2 are similar because there is once again a subtle difference that Patrick touches on.
And what was really interesting were the top 2. One is really, really obvious. So above experiences was like giving money away in like a targeted way, not just like general, like here you go, this organization or this nonprofit, but like actually giving it to a cause that you really cared about.
This was very interesting to me because I've given money to charity in the past, but I didn't feel the same level of happiness that I did when I spent it on myself for an experience. And I always thought it was because I was selfish. But the truth is, I didn't give my money away in a targeted way. Every billionaire seems to have a cause they really care about, and oftentimes they have their own foundations where they can see the positive effect money has on others. But most regular people don't have a foundation they run. They typically give their money away and don't get to see the effect it has. And so this has changed the way I've started to give money away. Instead of giving it to a random charity, the two things I started doing was leaving an unusually big tip at a restaurant for a waitress who was working multiple jobs and buying coffee for the person behind me in line just as a random act of kindness. It's not selfish for wanting to see the positive effect you're having by giving your money away. After all, it's your money, and if anyone judges you for it, then just remember, they probably aren't being as generous as you are. Finally, what's the number one thing you can spend money on to bring the most happiness?
But the top one was kind of fascinating. Like the things that we coded that built or brought the most happiness were what I kind of labeled freedom-inducing events or freedom-inducing items. So things like a jet. If you can afford a jet and you can fly private, it's not the nature of the jet, it's that it brings you so much freedom. And so we saw this kind of coded in all the responses. And so things like, I know, Sam, you've been a little hesitant to it, things like getting a personal assistant, things like getting someone to take care of stuff at the home. Those things actually bring a lot more happiness because unless you really, really like buying the groceries or doing something like that, that brings more freedom. And that actually increases happiness levels even more than all the other things that we talked about.
Now, buying a jet, getting a personal assistant, or having someone take care of things at home are a little out of reach for me. I can't afford those things, and even if I could, I don't even need them. But the things I've done in my life that are freedom-inducing items for me are paying for meal delivery services so I don't have to cook dinner, going through a car wash so I don't have to wash my own car, and spending money to start this YouTube channel. They've brought me an extreme amount of happiness because not having to cook food or wash my car means I get to spend more time in the day doing what I want. And spending money to start a side hustle means I might one day not have to rely on my 9-to-5 income. So how does this information give you more motivation to increase your income and save money? Well, it works like a flywheel. If you can create a spending framework to increase your happiness, you'll be more motivated to make more money, which will add to your happiness. And as you make more money, you'll be able to save more money, increasing your happiness even further. This cycle will repeat over and over, creating so much momentum in your life that you won't even know how to be miserable. So here's your new spending framework. Every time you get a paycheck, the first thing you should do is save 15% of your income. After you save 15% of your income, the other 85% is free to spend however you like. Obviously, with a portion of that 85%, you need to cover your basic needs: food, shelter, transportation, etc. But after you save 15% and cover your basic needs, take whatever's left over and spend it by first starting with level 5 and work your way down to level 1. And guess what? You're probably gonna run out of money before you get to level 2 or level 1. And that's the point. You should be spending your money first on the things that make you the happiest. But the reason we don't do this is because we copy what most people do. Most people have it completely backwards. They take their extra money and start at level 1 and try and work their way up to level 5. This is why you see so many people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s with nice cars and big homes that are miserable because they started spending money on level 1 items and never made enough money to spend on level 5 items, which are the items that will bring them the most happiness. But there's one freedom-inducing thing you can do in your life that has brought me the greatest sense of happiness that I haven't covered yet, and that's saving money. When you save and invest your money, you have money working for you rather than you working for it. This is the ultimate freedom-inducing item that you can spend your money on. But don't take it from me. Joe Rogan recently interviewed Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and they talked about how saving money not only can change your life, but give you superpowers in every area of your life. So check out this video next to find out how.